You ever get that gut feeling? The kind that crawls up your spine and whispers that something petty is about to backfire in the biggest way possible? That was me, standing in front of what used to be my mailbox. What had once been a sturdy wooden post and metal box was now nothing more than shattered lumber, twisted steel, and envelopes scattered in the ditch like confetti after a parade. Bills, flyers, and personal letters were soaking in the mud, like some cruel joke. I lived just outside a quiet subdivision, the kind of place where neighbors waved while mowing their lawns and kids pedaled bikes down cul-de-sacs. But lately, quiet wasn't the word I would have used. Not since the Homeowners Association got itself a brand new enforcer, Milton Craig. Now, Milton wasn't law enforcement. Not even close. But that didn't stop him from playing pretend. He strutted through the neighborhood in a reflective vest, with a radio clipped to his belt like a badge of honor, and a clipboard full of what looked like fake citations. He loved writing people up for petty nonsense: grass half an inch too tall, trash cans placed 2 minutes too early, or trucks parked too close to the curb. Milton acted like a small-town sheriff with way too much free time and zero authority. At first, I wanted to believe the broken mailbox was just an accident. Maybe a delivery truck clipped it, or some reckless teenager swung too wide. Annoying, yes, but accidents happen. I replaced the post with a standard one, the kind you buy at any home improvement store. Problem solved, or so I thought. 2 weeks later, the same thing happened. Splintered wood. Crumpled metal. Mail scattered again. That's when my gut told me this wasn't random. Somebody was doing this on purpose. When I started asking around, the whispers all pointed in the same direction: Milton. Apparently, he had a personal dislike for me. Why? Because I wasn't afraid to question HOA rules. If something didn't make sense, I asked why. If they pushed too hard, I pushed back. Milton, with his fake sense of power, didn't like that one bit. Now, breaking a mailbox? That seemed childish, even for him. But when you've got an ego like Milton's, petty becomes personal real quick. By the third time it happened, I was past annoyed. I was furious. See, there's something a lot of people don't know: destroying a mailbox isn't just vandalism, it's a federal crime. Under U.S. Code Title 18, Section 1705, it's illegal to tamper with or destroy someone's mailbox. The penalty? Fines and up to 3 years in prison. So when I walked into the next HOA meeting, I was ready to raise hell. The room was full of the usual suspects, neighbors flipping through papers, Karen the HOA president at the head of the table, and, of course, Milton. The man had the nerve to smirk at me as soon as I sat down, like he already knew why I was there. I brought up the mailbox issue, calmly at first, explaining how it had happened multiple times and that I suspected deliberate damage. Milton leaned back in his chair, arms folded, that smug grin never leaving his face. Maybe if you built it right, he said loud enough for everyone to hear, it wouldn't keep falling over. A couple of chuckles rippled through the room, but my blood boiled. That wasn't just a dig, that was practically a confession wrapped in mockery. That's when I noticed something. Milton's old pickup truck sat out in the lot, same one I'd seen parked at his house a dozen times. The front bumper? Bent and scratched. And the paint transfer along the edge looked an awful lot like the exact shade of my mailbox. Coincidence? Maybe. But my gut told me otherwise. I didn't have concrete proof yet, but for the first time, I knew exactly who I was up against. Milton thought he was untouchable, hiding behind his fake authority and Karen's blind loyalty. But I had a plan forming. If Milton wanted to keep playing demolition derby with my mailbox, I was going to make sure the next round didn't end the way he thought it would. The second time my mailbox got crushed, I tried to keep a level head. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it really was just bad luck. After all, the road in front of my property curved slightly, and I'd seen more than a few drivers swing wide. It was possible. So, I did what any reasonable person would do: replaced it. A simple post, a fresh box, nothing fancy. Hammer, concrete, level, done. I even double-checked the placement against county code just in case. But 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in the ditch again. Same scene. Same destruction. With splintered like kindling, box flattened like a soda can, my mail scattered down the roadside like a paper trail. This time, there were tire marks in the grass leading directly into it. Whoever was doing this wasn't just careless, they were aiming. That's when it stopped being a coincidence in my mind. I started paying closer attention, watching the neighborhood like a hawk. And the more I paid attention, the more a name kept floating back to me, Milton Craig. See, Milton wasn't just an HOA volunteer. He was Karen's right-hand man. If the president was the queen bee, Milton was her attack dog. Everyone knew it, and most people avoided crossing him just to stay out of trouble. But me? I'd already made the mistake of not bowing to his authority. It started small. A note on my door about my grass being a fraction too long. Another complaint about my truck being parked on the street overnight. Once, I even got a violation notice for having a garden hose stretched across my lawn. None of it came with real penalties, of course, because Milton didn't have any actual authority. But he loved flexing his clipboard like it made him king. Now, it wasn't hard for me to believe he'd take things further, especially when he felt someone wasn't respecting his so-called power. Neighbors noticed too. One evening while I was collecting what little remained of my mail, an older gentleman from 2 houses down slowed as he passed. "Mailbox again?" he asked, shaking his head. "Yeah," I muttered. "Third time." The man lowered his voice. "I'd keep an eye on Milton if I were you. He doesn't take kindly to being challenged. You're the only one who ever questions Karen in meetings." I wanted to dismiss it, but deep down, I knew he was right. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the bent remains of my mailbox propped in the corner like a trophy of defeat. 3 times. 3 deliberate hits. And every single time, Milton walked around with that smug look like he was above it all. The thought gnawed at me. Destroying someone's property wasn't just petty, it was illegal. And in this case, federally illegal. Title 18, Section 1705. I'd looked it up more than once, almost out of spite. Whoever destroyed that mailbox wasn't just messing with me, they were committing a crime that could land them in serious trouble. But suspicion wasn't proof. And if I'd learned anything about Milton, it was that he thrived on making me look unreasonable. He wanted me to blow up in an HOA meeting, to lose my temper, so Karen and the rest of the board could paint me as the problem. Not this time. If Milton wanted a war over a mailbox, then I was going to fight it the smart way. Not with shouting. Not with arguments. With evidence. The plan started forming in my head, a camera. Not the obvious kind that Milton could spot and avoid, but something subtle. I remembered I had an old wildlife trail cam I used when I first moved to the ranch to keep an eye on deer and coyotes. Motion activated, weatherproof, and nearly invisible once mounted. I could almost see it, Milton rolling down the street in that beat-up truck of his, bumper already bent, headlights cutting through the early morning fog. And this time, I wouldn't just have suspicions, I'd have proof. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time in weeks. If Milton thought this was still a game, he was about to learn the hard way that I play to win. By the 3rd time I found my mailbox smashed, my patience was gone. The post lay twisted at a 45-degree angle, and the box itself looked like it had been stomped flat by a giant. I didn't even bother picking up the scattered mail right away, I just stood there, staring at the wreckage, fists clenched. This wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck. Somebody was targeting me. And my gut told me exactly who. Milton Craig. The man had made me his personal project ever since the HOA put him in charge of enforcement. I'd always assumed his nonsense was limited to fake citations and passive-aggressive notes. But now? He'd crossed into federal crime territory. That night, I installed the trail cam. It was small, camouflaged, and designed to blend into the trees near the road. Perfect. I angled it just right, framing my new mailbox like it was the star of its own security show. Motion sensor on, batteries fresh, memory card empty. Now all I had to do was wait. It didn't take long. A week later, I scrolled through the footage on my laptop, sipping coffee in my kitchen. At first, just the usual, dogs trotting past, a kid on a bike, the mail carrier sliding envelopes into the box. Then, at exactly 6:14 a.m., there it was. Milton's dented pickup truck rolling down the street. I leaned in. The video showed him swerving, just slightly, but enough. The edge of his bumper clipped the mailbox. With splintered in an explosion of shards, the box flipped into the air, and letters went flying like snow in the wind. Milton didn't even slow down. He just kept driving, like nothing happened. I almost laughed. The self-proclaimed neighborhood sheriff, the guy who strutted around pretending to enforce rules, had just handed me the best evidence possible, him committing a federal crime on camera. The next HOA meeting couldn't come fast enough. When the evening arrived, I walked in calm, phone in hand. Karen sat at the head of the table, shuffling papers like she was running a courtroom. Milton lounged in the corner, arms folded, wearing that same smug grin. I waited until the usual complaints died down, grass height, fence paint, trash bins, before standing. "I'd like to address an issue," I said evenly. "My mailbox has been destroyed 3 times now." I set up a camera to catch the culprit. And I did. Every head turned. Milton's grin twitched just slightly. I tapped my phone, playing the footage. On screen, Milton's truck swerved into view. Crash. Mailbox obliterated. Letters flying. His dented bumper clear as day. The room went dead silent. Karen shifted uncomfortably. "Well, perhaps the footage isn't clear. Could be anyone's truck." I paused the video, zoomed in, and froze the frame. Milton's vanity license plate filled the screen. The silence turned heavier. People glanced from the plate to Milton, then back to me. Milton just leaned back further in his chair, arms crossed like none of it mattered. That smug look said it all. "Go ahead, show them. Nothing will happen." And in that moment, I realized he was right, at least about the HOA. Karen wasn't going to hold him accountable. Not when she treated him like her personal guard dog. If I wanted justice, I'd have to go outside their little circle of power. The board might ignore it, but the law wouldn't. That night, back at home, I opened my laptop again. The video played on repeat, Milton's truck slamming into my mailbox over and over like a looped confession. My anger simmered, but beneath it was something sharper. Resolve. He thought he humiliated me. He thought he could bully me into silence. But Milton had just made one mistake too many. And the next move? That was mine. The HOA meeting had been a joke. I'd walked in with proof, clear, undeniable proof, and still, Karen brushed it off like it was nothing. Milton didn't even flinch when his license plate lit up the screen. He just sat there, smug as ever, like he knew the board would protect him. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Driving home that night, my jaw was tight, hands gripping the steering wheel. I kept replaying the scene in my head, neighbors whispering, Karen defending, Milton smirking. The message was loud and clear. If I wanted justice, the HOA wasn't going to deliver it. Which meant I had to think bigger. That's when the idea hit me. Not just to replace the mailbox again, that would be too easy. Too predictable. No, if Milton wanted to keep playing demolition derby with my property, I was going to make sure the next round ended differently. But I couldn't just throw up a concrete barricade and call it a day. That would have been illegal. County codes are very specific about mailbox construction. Posts have to be breakaway friendly in case of accidental impacts. Maximum 4 inches in diameter. Placement has to follow exact measurements from the curb. And if you go too far, you're the one breaking the law. So, I started researching. Nights were spent scrolling through county ordinances, federal regulations, even USPS guidelines. The deeper I went, the more I realized there was wiggle room. Plenty of it. The law didn't say I couldn't build something stronger, it just had to look right and break away under extreme force. That left a lot of creative options. I sketched out a design at my kitchen table, a steel core post hidden inside a decorative brick column. The brick would be hollow, so technically breakaway friendly, but with the steel inside, it would take a tank to bring it down. On top, a locking mailbox rated indestructible by the manufacturer. Heavy-duty hinges, reinforced door, built to withstand baseball bats, fireworks, even crowbars. Legal? Absolutely. Unstoppable? You bet. The next weekend, I went to work. Neighbors slowed down as they walked their dogs or drove by, curiosity written all over their faces. Some waved. One even called out, "Upgrading the mailbox?" I just smiled. Making sure it holds this time. Brick by brick, the column rose. Inside, the steel post stood firm, set deep in concrete like a spine. I left the top smooth, neat, nothing flashy, just another mailbox on the street. By the time I installed the final box, polished and locked, it looked classy but ordinary. No one would suspect what it really was. But I knew. And that was enough. Each time I walked past it, a little smile tugged at my lips. It wasn't just a mailbox anymore, it was a fortress. A silent challenge. A trap waiting for the exact fool who couldn't resist. And I didn't have to wonder long about who that fool would be. Every time Milton's truck rumbled past, I imagined the bumper lining up with the post. I pictured his smug grin disappearing the second steel met steel. I almost felt sorry for his pickup. Almost. By the end of the week, I was ready. The camera stayed hidden, batteries replaced, memory card empty. My paperwork was neatly filed in a folder, county codes, manufacturer's specs, even an email from Public Works confirming my design was compliant. Milton thought he had me boxed in. He thought smashing a mailbox was some kind of power move, proof he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. But the next time he aimed his truck at my property, he wasn't just going to hit a mailbox. He was going to hit the end of his own game. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The sun was just starting to rise, soft orange light spilling across the subdivision. I was in the kitchen, coffee mug warm in my hand, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. It should have been an ordinary morning. Then came the sound. A dull, heavy thud followed by the screech of tires clawing at asphalt. Then a metallic crunch so loud it rattled my windows. I froze, mud halfway to my lips, and for a split second, I knew exactly what had just happened. My smile started before I even stepped outside. There, at the edge of my property, Milton's old pickup was nose-deep into my brand-new mailbox. The hood crumpled like a soda can, steam hissing from the radiator, airbags dangling from the shattered windshield. My mailbox? Still standing tall, barely a scratch on its brick face. And Milton, poor, smug Milton, was sitting in the driver's seat, clutching his arm, swearing loud enough to wake the neighborhood. I strolled out slowly, coffee mug in hand, the picture of calm. The air smelled of burnt rubber and leaking coolant. Milton's curses carried down the street, sharp and bitter. "What the hell did you do to your mailbox?" he shouted, spittle flying, face red as a stop sign. I raised an eyebrow, taking a slow sip before answering. "Built it to code. Can't help it if you can't drive." That only made him angrier. He struggled out of the truck, staggering onto the curb, cradling his arm like it might be broken. His bumper, already bent from past accidents, now hung half-detached, scraping the ground. I didn't even bother hiding my grin. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the crash. Curtains twitched, doors opened, phones came out. People whispered, some openly pointing at Milton's wrecked truck. A few laughed. One man muttered, "Guess he finally got what was coming." And then came Karen. Bathrobe, slippers, hair wild like she'd rolled out of bed and sprinted down the street. Her voice cut through the morning air like a rusty whistle. "This is outrageous," she barked, stomping toward me. You set a trap for him. This is entrapment. I'll be reporting you to the HOA for creating unsafe conditions. I almost laughed right in her face. Entrapment? Really? I held up my phone, already recording. The camera caught everything, the mailbox still standing, Milton's truck wrecked, Karen's finger jabbing the air like a furious conductor. Unsafe? I said evenly. Karen, your boy here has been destroying my property for weeks. Federal property, I might add. He hit it again, and this time, it didn't give. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but she didn't get a chance to answer. The wail of sirens cut her off. 2 police cruisers turned onto the street, lights flashing, tires crunching to a stop beside the wreck. Milton paled. His bravado faded in an instant as the officers stepped out, one heading straight for the crumpled truck, the other toward me. The first officer leaned over, inspected the mailbox, tapped the brick column, and then turned to me. Did you reinforce this illegally? No, sir, I replied calmly, setting my coffee down and pulling out the folder I'd prepared weeks ago. Steel post, 4-inch diameter, breakaway design. County Code Section 14.08. Mailbox purchased directly from an approved manufacturer. Public Works cleared it. The officer flipped through the paperwork, nodding. Looks solid. Karen pounced, voice shrill. He's lying. That mailbox is a weapon. He built it to target Milton. But the officer didn't look convinced. If anything, he looked annoyed at her interruption. Meanwhile, Milton leaned against the truck, sweat on his forehead, arms still tucked close to his chest. The smug sheriff act was gone. All that remained was a man caught red-handed, his truck mangled against a mailbox that refused to budge. And I wasn't even finished watching him squirm. The flashing red and blue lights painted the street in pulsing waves. Neighbors crowded along sidewalks now, cell phones raised like reporters desperate for the best angle. Milton's truck hissed and ticked as the engine cooled, its front end a mangled mess still fused into my mailbox. 2 officers moved with calm precision. The one with my paperwork tucked it under his arm, nodding approvingly at my prep work. The other crouched by Milton, assessing the damage. You all right, sir? The officer asked. Milton groaned dramatically, holding his arm like it was hanging on by a thread. He set me up. That mailbox is a death trap. You gotta arrest him. The officer raised an eyebrow. Sir, you ran into a stationary object on private property. Karen immediately shoved her weight forward, waving her hands like a lawyer on the courthouse steps. No, you don't understand. This man, she jabbed a finger toward me, has been harassing Milton for weeks. He deliberately built that mailbox to hurt him. The officer sighed, clearly unimpressed. He turned to me. Sir, can you explain? I smiled politely, handing over my neatly tabbed folder again. As I told your partner, I installed this mailbox according to county code and USPS standards. Reinforced steel post, 4-inch diameter, breakaway construction. Inspected, approved, and documented. The officer flipped through the paperwork, whistled low. Everything checks out. Karen's jaw dropped. You can't be serious. But the officer ignored her. Instead, he crouched by the wreckage, tapping the mailbox foundation with his flashlight. The sound was solid, clean, undeniably legit. Mailbox is legal, he said firmly. Then he turned to Milton. Sir, how many times have you hit this mailbox before today? Milton stammered, his face reddening. It was an accident. The officer cut him off. Because witnesses, he gestured toward the crowd of neighbors, say this wasn't the first time. That's when my neighbor Jim, a retired Army vet who lived across the street, spoke up. Officer, I've seen that man swerve into this mailbox 3 times. Thought he was doing it on purpose. A ripple of agreement spread through the crowd. Phones lifted higher. Murmurs grew louder. Milton's excuses started to crumble. His swagger was gone, replaced by sweat and desperation. The officer straightened. "All right, sir. Based on the damage, your admitted involvement, and multiple witness statements, this is being filed as destruction of property. Federal property, actually, since it involves a mailbox." Milton's eyes bulged. "Federal? Come on, it's just a box." I couldn't resist chiming in, my voice steady. "Not just a box, Milton. A mailbox is under federal jurisdiction. Tampering with one is a serious crime." Karen exploded, stomping her slippered foot on the pavement. "This is ridiculous. You can't arrest him, he's the HOA security chief." The officers exchanged a glance. One muttered, "That explains a lot." Then, as if to put an exclamation point on the whole ordeal, Milton tried to bluff one last time. He puffed his chest, wincing at the pain in his arm, and snapped, "I'll have both of your badges for this. You can't treat me like some common criminal." The officer nearest him leaned in close, his voice low but sharp. "You're not a cop, sir. You're a man who destroyed federal property. And right now, you're lucky you only walked away with a busted truck." The crowd chuckled, a few people outright laughing. Phones caught every second. Karen looked like she was about to faint. Milton looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. Then came the words I'd been waiting for. "Sir, you're under arrest for destruction of property, reckless driving, and endangerment." The metallic click of handcuffs snapped through the morning air. Milton's face drained of color as his arms were pulled behind his back. I took one last sip of my coffee, the steam curling in the cool morning air. The mailbox stood tall, unbroken, a silent witness to everything. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe easy. But I also knew one thing, Karen wasn't finished yet. The sound of handcuffs still hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Milton stood there, wrists bound, sputtering half-formed protests while neighbors whispered and filmed every second. To most people, the matter was clear, he'd been caught red-handed. But Karen wasn't most people. She pushed through the crowd like a storm in slippers, bathrobe flapping, hair sticking out at wild angles. Her face was red with fury, the kind of shade that comes from realizing control is slipping away. "This is outrageous," she shrieked. "You can't just haul off our HOA security director like some criminal. He was doing his duty." The officers didn't even look at her. One continued speaking into his radio, confirming the tow truck's ETA for Milton's wrecked pickup, while the other walked Milton toward the squad car. Karen wasn't about to be ignored. She spun on me, her finger jabbing the air like a spear. "You set a trap. You've been undermining this HOA since the day you moved in. Well, congratulations, you've just endangered the entire neighborhood with your medieval booby trap of a mailbox." I sipped my coffee slowly, letting her words hang there. "County approved," I said flatly. "And last I checked, federal law doesn't excuse people from intentionally ramming their trucks into mailboxes." The crowd chuckled. Someone muttered, "She's really losing it." Phones kept recording. Karen heard the laughter and her face twisted. Her power had always come from intimidation, stern emails, angry phone calls, lecturing neighbors about weeds or trash cans. But now? She was unraveling in front of her entire audience. She tried again, louder. "Don't you all see? If we let him get away with this, no one's safe. He'll build bunkers instead of fences. He'll make traps out of garden gnomes. He's dangerous." That one actually earned some outright laughs. Even Jim, the army vet across the street, shook his head. "Karen, the only danger here is your pal Milton thinking he's a cop." Karen snapped toward him. "And you! You're all just sitting back, letting this man destroy everything we've built in this community." The officer by the squad car finally turned, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Ma'am, enough. The HOA doesn't override federal law. This man," he jerked his thumb at Milton, now sagging against the car seat, "destroyed federal property. That's the only reason we're here." But Karen wasn't done. She puffed up her chest, clearly convinced this was her big courtroom moment. Then I'll take it to the board. We'll have an emergency meeting tonight. This entire neighborhood will vote on his removal. You hear me? She spun toward the gathered crowd. All of you will back me, right? Right? Silence. A long, heavy silence that settled over the street like a verdict. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, but nobody spoke up. A few people even lowered their phones, exchanging smirks. Karen's mouth worked like a fish gasping for air. She had expected cheers, support, validation. Instead, she had nothing but the sound of Milton being loaded into the back of a squad car. I finally broke the quiet. Funny thing, Karen. You keep talking about community. But community means looking out for each other, not covering up crimes for your friends. Her face darkened, but she couldn't fire back. Not with half the neighborhood recording her meltdown. Not with Milton's truck still crumpled against my unbroken mailbox like the world's most damning exhibit. The tow truck rumbled down the street, breaking the tension. The operator gave a low whistle when he saw the wreckage. Mailbox 1, pickup 0, he joked, strapping Milton's pride and joy to the winch. Milton groaned from inside the squad car. Karen just folded her arms, seething, trapped between outrage and humiliation. The officer handed me his card again, speaking just loud enough for everyone to hear. If the HOA causes you any more trouble, call me directly. You're in the clear. That single sentence was like a gavel strike. Authority had spoken. And for once, Karen had no comeback. As the cruisers pulled away, taking Milton with them, I turned to head back inside. My mailbox stood tall, solid, unshaken. Karen stood trembling in the street, her empire of intimidation crumbling around her. For the first time in a long while, the neighborhood wasn't afraid of her anymore. The neighborhood was buzzing for days after Milton's spectacular crash. It wasn't every morning that people saw the self-proclaimed HOA cop get cuffed and hauled away in broad daylight. Videos of the scene spread faster than gossip at a church picnic. By noon, nearly everyone in the subdivision had seen Karen's meltdown on camera, Milton's wrecked truck, and my mailbox standing tall like a monument to poetic justice. For once, I didn't have to defend myself. The footage did the talking. 3 days later, I got a call from the county prosecutor's office. Milton was officially being charged with destruction of federal property under Title 18, Section 1705, as well as reckless driving. Maximum penalty, 3 years in prison and restitution. The officer who'd given me his card even stopped by to shake my hand and let me know they were building a strong case. Meanwhile, Karen was scrambling. She called for an emergency HOA meeting, claiming the neighborhood was in chaos and that my weaponized mailbox had endangered the community. She even printed flyers, slipping them into mail slots. When the night of the meeting came, I showed up early, paperwork in hand, just in case. The room was full, neighbors crammed shoulder to shoulder, murmuring. The energy was different, though. People weren't afraid of Karen anymore. She strutted in like a general entering a battlefield, clutching her binder of rules. "Thank you for coming," she said loudly, trying to command the room. "We are here to address the dangerous actions of one of our homeowners, whose reckless mailbox construction has caused damage, injury, and division." A few people actually chuckled. Karen pressed on, face tight. "This is not the kind of community we want to live in." I motioned to have him fined and his mailbox removed immediately. Silence. Then Jim, the retired Army vet, stood. "Karen, with all due respect, you've lost the plot. That mailbox is legal. Milton destroyed it, on purpose, 3 times. And now he's facing federal charges. You can't twist this around." Heads nodded across the room. Someone added, "I saw the video, Karen." We all did. Karen's composure cracked. "Videos can be manipulated," she snapped. Another neighbor raised their phone. "Funny, because I filmed it too. Want me to play it?" Karen's mouth opened, then shut. The HOA president, who had always been quick to defend Milton, looked exhausted. She cleared her throat. I think it's best if we move on. Clearly, the board won't be pursuing action against the mailbox. In fact, she glanced at me reluctantly, we owe an apology for dismissing the earlier complaints. Karen's face turned crimson. She slammed her binder shut and stormed out, muttering about ungrateful neighbors and witch hunts. But nobody followed her. That was the turning point. In the weeks that followed, the HOA shifted. Rules were still enforced, but without the constant harassment. People started mowing their lawns when they felt like it, not because Karen left nasty notes. Trucks parked in driveways without incident. For the first time in years, the neighborhood actually felt free. As for Milton, word spread quickly after his court date. He pled guilty in exchange for a lighter sentence, but he still faced fines, probation, and the cost of repairing my mailbox, not that it needed it. His pickup was totaled, and so was his reputation. I saw him once, weeks later, riding in the passenger seat of an old sedan, arm in a sling, eyes downcast. The swagger was gone. He didn't even glance my way. Karen kept a low profile after that. Rumor was, she tried to rally support to oust the board president, but nobody was interested. Without Milton backing her up, her bark had no bite. And me? Every morning I'd walk out with my coffee, glance at my brick fortress of a mailbox, and smile. It wasn't just standing there, it was a reminder. A reminder that bullies only win when people let them. A reminder that sometimes the law works exactly the way it should. And most of all, a reminder that karma doesn't just knock politely. Sometimes, it arrives with flashing lights, handcuffs, and a tow truck. In the end, Milton and Karen learned the hard way, you can only push people so far before the ground shifts beneath you. And when it does, karma wears a badge.